I'm not someone who easily succumbs to superstitious fits of apprehension, nor am I easily led down imaginative avenues of the bleak and macabre, of the dreadful and ghastly. But when I found the laptop, when it was undesirably introduced into my life, I became as a child, fearful of the dark, terrified of the solitude that lies in one's own waking mind when family and friends have slipped away to the lands of dream. The laptop was more than just a computational machine, more than the portable gateway to digital expanses and realms of distanced socialization that its unknown manufacturers might have intended for it to be. It was an aperture to hellish spheres through which the ghastly forms of fiends and demons crossed as of some familiar bridge, a yore-traveled path that, in my discovery of it, would again be tread by hoof and talon, be slithered upon by tentacle and tail. I couldn't have ever before believed possible the depths of madness and despondency into which I would soon plunge after its discovery. If forewarned, I wouldn't have believed that the ostensibly harmless device could harbor within its compartments the interdimensional pathways to planes beyond human cognizance, in which infernal horrors reveled and roared in cosmic lunacy, their infectious mania soon to be transferred to the pitiful home of men, transferred to my mind. I had been awaiting a reply to a message sent with the boldness that befits one who had begun his day with a stiff drink of coffee and an even stiffer shot of whiskey. With an audacity afforded to me by cheap bourbon, I sent a rather presumptuous message to a colleague, one Marissa Crawford, detailing my desires to enhance our previously platonic relationship to a more romantic level, as well as suggesting we skip the evening's lecture. We cooperatively taught a course on Gothic literature at the state's only university, and dine on something of a Hispanic variety at my apartment. Unfortunately, in my liquor-comforted stroll to the cafe, where I suggested we meet as a preamble, I hadn't realized that my phone's battery had been depleted the night before. Seconds after I sent the message, I was suddenly confronted with the diminishing logo of my phone's manufacturer and a black screen after that, doubly upsetting due to her messaging profile listing her as being online. If she agreed, I wouldn't know until I returned home, and if she had staunchly disagreed, my then somewhat greater expectation, time was of the essence in lessening the resultant effects of my proposition, lest she inform others of my attempted paramour and make a fool of me among the faculty. After I ordered and received my drink, I sat down at a table facing the window that overlooked the busy street and gazed languorously around on the off chance that I would find a compatible charger for my phone somewhere in the cafe. My survey scanned over the hunched forms of men and women who either could not afford the modern necessity of Wi-Fi or narcissistically desired to be observed while working on some ultimately futile literary or cinematic endeavor. I had just about given up on my search when my eyes landed on an empty table, upon which sat a black, closed laptop without any accompanying cables, accessories, or items that would suggest it was or would soon have been in use by a patron of the restaurant. Casually, somewhat too casually given the already relaxed nature of cafes in general, I walked over to the unattended computer and sat down at the table. The front face of the laptop showed neither print nor symbol that would denote ownership or origin of design, although the sides were equipped with all the standard ports and openings that you would expect to find in a laptop of the last few years. Gazing around to reaffirm its orphanage, I was met only with quick, uninterested glances at my relocation, but I was otherwise unapproached by any would-be owners or protesters to my use of the machine. I raised the top and revealed the screen. Black it had not been on, and studied the surface, nearly as black as the inactive screen. The keys and surface panels were of a weird ebon sheen, as if specially constructed to appear as a single surface. However, the more I focused, the more I could make out the lettering inscribed on the keys and the various other sections of the surface, such as the trackpad and power button. My newly acquired acuity seemed almost a reactionary effect by the laptop, as though my attention evoked the appearance of its functional aspects. Feeling emboldened by this phenomenon, which somehow imparted a vague sense of familiarity, or perhaps some weird predestination, I pressed the power button. A white screen appeared immediately, though it displayed nothing beyond its blank electric canvas. I waited, but after several moments no change had occurred, so I pressed Ctrl-Alt-Delete, hoping to bring up a control panel of some kind, but the input elicited nothing. I considered the possibility that this laptop had been malfunctioning in some way, which would have somewhat explained its apparent abandonment. On an impulse, I touched the screen with the tip of my right hand's index finger, deeming it worth a try to see if it was equipped with touchscreen functionality as some of the recent models have been. The surface of the screen was not at all like that of what I was accustomed to, and bore a strange tactility, a semi-material fluidity, as if the screen could at any moment lose its material integrity and disintegrate to assume some other state or form. A circular wave on the screen erupted from the contact of my finger to its surface. The once white screen instantly turned to a deep black that seemed three-dimensional, as if I could somehow dive into the window and submerge myself in some bottomless gulf. I stared, vexed by the transition, and felt myself become nauseated, disoriented, and, inexplicably, detached from my surroundings, as though the string that tied me to the normal and mortal plane of reality was cut, sending me plummeting into the boundless void between astral systems. My vision became obstructed first by a blackness that terrified me. Then, amidst the shadows, a light gleamed, some speck of luminosity that seemed even more evil than the darkness around it. A sinister beacon that shone not as a relief from the bleak environment in which I had been cast, but as an encroaching danger from which I must hide in the darkness I had just moments ago feared. It seemed to expand, and I briefly feared my consumption or incineration by its growth, but I soon came to realize that it was simply drawing closer, gradually, propelled by an engine unseen from my position of transfixion. It was only at this revelation that I began to try and ascertain the nature of my presence and found that I was bodiless. My limbs and personage had been eradicated, and I existed in some disembodied state of consciousness that merely observed the cosmic expanse around me. Looking below, I saw an incomputable array of what I believed to be stars in that void, shining with varying degrees of brilliance. I wished to go to them, to bathe myself in their natural light and escape the incoming terror, whatever it was. Looking again to the incoming light, I was able to make out a general form, if the term were even applicable, a vague aspect of construction behind that ever-approaching sun. Some kind of body or structure warped the space behind the light, contrasting with the staticity of the umbral canvas around it. From my point of perception, I couldn't discern its size in relation to myself, but I could sense somehow that the thing was massive, a truly colossal body of something edging towards me. The longer I stared at it, the worse I began to feel, and I was soon afflicted with a condition I can only describe as an even deeper feeling of weightlessness, a state of physical non-entity that was essentially spectral. And before I could truly analyze what was happening, I was spirited towards the thing, blindingly fast. Propelled as if by its will to examine me, I came to a mentally jarring stop before the light, and although I lacked a corporeal form, the phantom of my being felt scorched by the brilliance of the terrifying forefront light. It shone before me immeasurably. The limits of its size I could not define or even guess at, through the total immediacy of it. I saw only a yellow-tinged whiteness, an all-encompassing blaze that consumed all thought and perception. The brightness was almost audible, the scent of stellar eruption olfactory, the taste of dead stars, and the sun-scorched earth of 1,000 worlds palpable on my phantasmal tongue. Then, without warning, I was spellbound. Images besieged my mind, captivated my sight, and played before me a vision so awful, so infernally horrendous, that I can only describe in the most loose of terms and phrases its ghastliness. I saw a dual-sunned system populated by 12 massive worlds, each dwarfing Earth in celestial corpulence, and each, though I know not how I owned this knowledge, populated by billions of sentient beings. Roughly in the center of this system, hovering inanimate between the suns, a mass of something stealthily lurked. It was like a shadow darker than the space around it, and of a size that rivaled the suns between which it held. Then, without any kind of warning or indication that it had reacted to something, the shadow grew, and that evil light shone in its center. The suns were blotted out by thousands of what seemed to be enormous limbs or appendages of some kind, and as the thing unfurled, the light's intensity grew. Even though this vision seemed to be a memory of a long-past event, I felt the emission of heat from that growing orb. Its expansion then terminated, and the Stygian limbs seemed to reach into vaster parts of the galaxy beyond the bounds of the system from which they had grown. I soon felt a sense of panic and grave fear from the peoples that inhabited the planets of the system, heard the echoes of their unintelligible screams and cries of madness. And then it happened. In an instant so quick as to be near imperceptible, it flared to illuminate the entire galaxy in which the star system dwelled. The blinding light died down, and then nothing remained. The dozen planets I had beheld only a second earlier were gone. Not a single atom of planetary debris remained after. The shock of this wholesale annihilation, the efficacy of that thing's destruction, it ejected me from my dark absorption. I was back in the cafe, sitting at the table on which the laptop sat. The wicked contents harbored within no longer observable to me. The screen reverted to its once white display, and a message appeared thereafter. It read, "Do not call out to us. Stay among your kind. Do not tread out to the spaces in which light seems welcoming and warm. They are everywhere. They hear when you call, and they are so fast. You cannot flee from them. Millions of civilizations have perished in their light. They will reach you someday, but that day need not be soon. Extinguish your lights, silence your calls, and cease your searching. There is only death beyond the murk. Salvation lies within the depths of the mire. Darkness is safety. Do not be fooled by the light." The message persisted for only a few seconds before disappearing, and soon after the entire laptop disappeared as well. No one else in the cafe seemed to notice the object vanish. The entire sequence of events and my enchantment by that dreadful daydream seemed to have transpired completely unbeheld by my fellow patrons, and I sat in disbelief at the table, my drink still radiating heat and emitting steam. I reread the message in my mind, for it had been burned into my psyche from the few seconds of time I had been allowed to perceive it. Do not be fooled by the light. I remember seeing those countless stars below me during my cosmic internment, and how I had longed for their warmth and security. So foolish a desire, their true nature at last revealed to me. I now sit in my apartment gazing at the stars, observing how they twinkle and glitter so beautifully against the night sky. I feel so afraid of them. Earlier, I had feared rejection and embarrassment. Marissa, by the way, had said yes during my hypercosmic enthrallment just seconds after the message had been sent. I still haven't replied. I don't know what I could possibly say to her, or how I could even be among people so ignorant of the doom that will someday obliterate everything we know. I wish I had never touched that laptop. I wish I could share in the ignorance so unappreciatively enjoyed by my peers. The internet, in its seemingly boundless capacity, may house mundane horrors, human atrocities, and devious dealings, but that computer was a connection to a much darker network, and in my spectral, noctivagent occupancy of its nexus, I saw a thing unrivaled in sheer malevolence, an entity beyond our most heinous conceptions of evil. I saw the eyes of Annihilation,